you'll go ahead and let me know when you find it. Everybody yet, so make sure. Um, this evening, I wanted to welcome Rachel and Jeremy. They are going to be joining us tonight and talking about their company uh, movement. I don't know, however you want to how you want to describe it. Ways to respond to stress. And so I will, and those of you that have been with me on my journey know that this year, besides the pandemic, has been a little crazy with my husband's stroke and life in general, and moves and some different things. So the show was my way to pay it forward and to just be here and help people and learn and grow as we go through all this pandemic stuff. So I'm excited to have them this evening. So thank you guys for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Very cool. So if do you want to kind of start off by telling why or what you guys are doing and why you've started it?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So,
Very
do you want to kind of introduce yourself, what you do, and then I'll do the same, and then we'll
Sure.
tell a bit about our story.
So I'm Jeremy Green. I have been a firefighter for 16 years. Uh, so yeah, it's, last year was a really rough year. And yeah, I kind of hit rock bottom. Some stuff happened and decided, I was at the point where I needed help. And thankfully, Rachel helped me and was able to get me to a place where I could get the help that I needed so I could come out the other side. So, and that's kind of how we got started. So,
Yeah. Um,
Very good.
sorry, I'm seeing some chat messages. I'll let you take care of those. I know I'm gonna I'm a helper. I want to help.
No, it's very good. But she didn't see a chat box, so hopefully people will be able to see messages as we go.
Okay, perfect. I hope so. So yes, so I am Rachel. I am a counselor licensed in Kansas and Missouri. So I run a private practice here in Kansas City on the Missouri side, and then I've been counselor and clinical director of Horses and Heroes since about 2015. And yeah, so a lot of obviously like my work has been very trauma and stress focused. Um, a topic and concerns that I love working with, and get to work with a lot of military and veterans and first responders with Horses and Heroes, and also in my private practice. And then being married to Jeremy and being, fire wife or first responder spouse gave me a whole new insight into these worlds in a new way as a family member. So, last year, 2019 was tough, to say the least. So we went through a lot of personal challenges, had some professional struggles, and just on both sides, just a lot of chronic, where we saw chronic stress showing up for both of us. And then starting in February, Jeremy's dad had a stroke, and so that went on for weeks, several weeks, that he was going back and forth to Louisiana to be with his dad and take care of his dad, who several weeks later ended up passing away. At the same time, my sister and I are partial caregivers for our dad who has Parkinson's disease. And so lots of caring for him. He was in and out of the hospital at the same time. My sister had her first baby and then was in the ICU just less than a few weeks later. And so I was staying in the ICU with her. So lots of stuff, lots of intense things, just back to back to back. And, while Jeremy is going through his own stuff and, 15, 16 years on the fire department, plus unresolved things and difficulties and traumas from childhood, and added up until, like you said, he hit rock bottom and actually interrupted his suicide attempt and then we got him into treatment. And so he was in treatment for about 40 days, a wonderful program here in Kansas City that serves military and first responders. And that was the gist. So that's the start of where all this came from and where Restore and the movement and stuff that we've been creating.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of, I mean, it's a very condensed background too.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it helps, I think, people understand where you're coming from and why you have started what you have, because it's needed not only with first responders, military, and I mean, they get it day in and day out, but I think everybody right now is kind of struggling and trying to figure out what can they do. I mean, what are options, and are there options out there? So
right, yeah, absolutely, yeah. The level of stress and the intensity of it across the board in this country is significant, and so I think we're seeing a lot of it with people even prior to COVID, but since COVID, right, added a whole new experience of chronic stress for people. So yeah, it's definitely very present in this country, especially.
Yeah. Well, anxiety is through the roof. We run those calls every day, all day long. And I mean, people are shut in, not, it might look like things are open and people are moving around. There's still a lot of people that can't. And, it's affecting everyone.
yeah. So one of the things I know we talked about ahead of time is it doesn't have to be even the things that are happening right now. Like you said, there are things that may have happened last year or before that have just kind of been building up, and it just kind of hits a point where the stress level is at full tilt, for lack of a better word. So what would be, I mean, where do they start? What would be a good place to, I mean, what do you suggest as a starting point or way to go from here?
Yeah. Do you want to go? Or?
You're the mental health.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So honestly, and this is where Restore, the approach that we came up with really came out of, because so all of that stuff that happened, that just continued to pile up for us, and I can very much go into a space of just powering through and doing what needs to be done, and so there's many of us, right? Yeah. I know I'm not alone there. And so, and with Jeremy, when he went into treatment, and I was especially that. So one, it was an amazing godsend and a blessing, the amount of support that I had, and a lot of people don't have that. But I did. And so that was a true blessing. But, I powered through. And so I didn't recognize things as an issue for myself until later. But I just did what had to be done, and, supporting him while he was in treatment and figuring out what I needed to do and taking care of the house and the dogs and still going to work. And it wasn't until 6 months later that everything caught up to me. It hit me. And so the first part of our Restore model is to recognize, to really even be able to recognize like what's going on, what those signs and symptoms are. And so then what to do, right? But I was powering through and just doing what I had to do, and taking care of everything else and everyone else who still needed me, right? And that stuff is a reality, and that's what's difficult. Like, luckily he was there and he was safe and he was getting help, but my dad's needs didn't stop. My sister healing from what she went through after pregnancy and nearly losing her, and so her healing, and then my clients, like I didn't stop working. But it was 6 months. It took me 6 months for it to catch up and for me to recognize. And so that's where that first R came from, is realizing that's the first step, is to be able to even recognize what's going on, so we know what to do or where to go from there.
The thing, what I was going to say is just to remember that stress is cumulative, like kind of what you talked about before of, doesn't have to be one big thing. It could be just little things over time that you haven't recognized, that you didn't deal with at the time. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, why do I feel this way? Or why am I, well, it's because of everything in the past, so you have to bring that stuff out and deal with it. The worst piece of advice that I ever got on the fire department, as far as mental health goes, is whenever I was in the academy, they told us, all right, whenever you get out there, you leave your feelings at home in a box under your bed. You don't take them to work with you. That's terrible advice. That's, and I get the idea behind it. It was compartmentalization, right? So you go out there, you have to do the job. You can't let your emotions and feelings get in the way of doing that, because then you wouldn't be effective. But they don't talk about the second part and the most important part of it, which is you still have to deal with all of that stuff. You have to bring it back out, unpack it, and then that allows you to move forward in a healthy space instead of, letting it just build up.
Yeah, good. That second part would be key, because
Yeah.
I believe I'm just as guilty of the last 8 months for us have been pretty much nonstop, go, 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 go. And then I finally stopped and it's like, oh.
Right. It's always whenever you try to stop and take a breath, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the dealing with it is, yeah. Phase 2, I guess.
Yeah.
So would it be helpful? Do you want me to put these up so that you can see all 7 at once, or do you want me to put them up one at a time?
We can put them up one at a time and then kind of, walk through those. And because obviously like this came from our story, and so then we can kind of just explain how they showed up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great.
And this even came about, it's kind of funny. We were, one of Jeremy's passions is off-roading and working on and building up Jeeps to do off-roading. So he's a part of a local group of a bunch of other firefighters, but now, expanding into other first responders to go on these Jeep trips together. And so we were on our way back from one. We were on the way down, so I'll give a shout out to Tanya Glenn, who's a fantastic therapist down in Texas, who specializes in working with military and first responders. So we had been reading one of her books on the way down and just talking about stuff. And on the way back, I don't know, somewhere probably joked about acronyms, right? Because they're huge. They exist all over in military and first responder realms. So we're like, all right, if we would create an acronym, what would it be? And, the word restore came up as something very relevant to us, because what we went through was about restoring our relationship too, because parts of that, what came up where he hit rock bottom too, was, some things coming out that were really difficult for us to have to deal with and heal from in our relationship, not just personally, but in our marriage. And so restoration was a huge part of that, or restoring. And so that's where the restore came from. And that, again, that recognition part. And we looked at it twofold. So Tanya Glenn has this great metaphor analogy that she uses as part of critical incident response, about, this target analogy and looking at from the center and going outward, right? And so that who, what, when, where was really important for us to look at that. But then in general, signs and symptoms. And we purposely talked about, those 4 pieces. So like the who, so who's involved, what's going on? Is it past stuff? Is it present stuff? Is it future triggers or concerns that, I'm worried about or aware of? And where is it? So where is it showing up in my body? What symptoms am I having physiologically? Is it work? Is it home? Is it school? And we purposefully left out why, because we both know like that's a space that we can really get stuck in, that analysis paralysis type stuff, and wonder about the why of things or why something is happening. And sometimes we have to just deal with the what, and what is happening, what has happened, and what can I do about it. So that was kind of just the first piece of that.
Well, and then we had talked about, how we wanted it to be more, obviously it can be in response to, an incident or cumulative stress or whatever, but we really wanted to focus it on more of a prevention model, because if we can, help people not get to the point, that I got to,
Yeah.
that's the big thing. And being able to have those coping skills and know the challenges that you're going to face, I mean, that's huge, which, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but, it's the prevention part of it, at least for me, is what I'm passionate about.
Yeah. No, I think that's amazing. All right, you want me to go? Let's see. So recognize is the first one,
Sure. Yeah.
and then there you go.
Yeah. And so I'll kind of, so it's okay, totally sound educated. I'll say from my own experience, as I'm like backtracking a little bit. So what I had to recognize, like my burnout showed up. This is even part of our, it's okay to not be okay. So this is hard for me to even share, right? Because as we mental health professionals talk a lot about self-care and boundaries and all this stuff, but in reality, we can be some of the first to not follow our own advice or our own, suggestions or whatever, and like what we know to work. And we are people who are, very service minded. And so again, it can be easy to just do that service over self, much like military members and first responders. And so, and that's kind of just how I am. And so, God created me somebody who is very empathetic and loving and compassion driven at my core. And so I think I'm in the field that he just created me to be in. So for me, when I started to recognize that I was more short-tempered, that I was irritable, that I was struggling with compassion and empathy, because that is so not me to struggle with, I knew something was going on. And I had gotten through pretty good, but I could start to feel like, I always say it's like there was this part of me that was screaming internally. Like I could look like I had it all together from the outside, but from the inside, it was stirred up and it was screaming and it was saying, I need help. I need the sound and all this stuff to stop. And then a really hitting point, I lost a dear cousin of mine who I grew up with. We, all grew up together in this really tight core. And I got a call when I was at work one day that we thought he had died by suicide, and then it ended up being investigated as a murder. And that day was kind of just when it all just was too much. And of course, I went home that day. My work at that point, I was working for another nonprofit who's incredibly supportive and loving. We're like, yeah, go home, like be with your family, figure this out. And of course, go back to work. I don't know, next day, day after, whatever, because that's what I do. And it was right in that time that it just, I would cry before work. I would want to cry in between sessions. I would just have that intensity and this like part that was just screaming out even. And so for me, that's when I knew, like, all right, that was my recognition that this isn't me. Something's off, something's not working. Yeah, and so he was incredibly supportive. And again, I'm really blessed that somebody was able to go, hey, you need to take a break. Like, we're okay. We'll figure out the money part, like, but you got to take care of you at this point. And so then that's where the education. So the EM resorbing to educate, or education about what you're experiencing, what the symptoms are, because trauma and stress, it's not just a one size fits all. It's not one thing that's for everybody. And there's different kinds of it. And so, I was lucky that being in the field that I'm in, I knew some of it, and I have enough peers and stuff in the field who were able to kind of help me normalize it. And the, therapist that I worked with at the time, and, going to work with somebody who specializes in trauma and EMDR. And so that was a huge piece, right? To just even normalize what was going on in me, that I was experiencing a delayed stress response, that the flooding of emotions, the overwhelm, all of that I was experiencing was a normal part of it. And then that gave me something to work with. And so I needed something tangible, like, here's what's going on now, here's what I can do about it.
Yeah. Okay. So
yeah.
people recognize that there's an issue, the stress they need to deal with, then the education is next. All right, I'm going to ask you on what you have up there. So the definitions, like you said, to figure out, to educate yourself a little bit, but what are and you talked about the functions in the nervous system.
Yeah, yeah. And so when we normally, like when I presented on this in workshops, right? So it goes into, that could take a lot of time, which is super fun. Yeah, if you're nerdy and you like talking about all that stuff, but that is a piece of it. So just even normalizing and educating people about trauma, that there is acute trauma, that there's cumulative trauma, which is huge in his realm.
Secondary trauma, tertiary trauma. Because just because it doesn't happen to you, doesn't mean that you're not traumatized by it. You can see something, which is a lot of, at least my profession, what we deal with is that secondary trauma of seeing things. It's not happening to us normally. And I mean, it does, we have guys get hurt, guys die, and that does happen, but it's rare. Not as rare as it should be, but thankfully it's rare. But what we deal with mostly is having to see people hurt or dead or, whatever. And that's where a lot of, I think, and I can't speak on haven't done a study or anything, but I think that's where a lot of our problems come from, with having to see the things that we see on a day in and day out basis.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And what's difficult, what's different for them is, so, we mental health professionals, are hearing the things, or we're reading about things, or every once in a while there are times that we're responding to a crisis, but there typically for us gets to be like we're helping the person heal, or we're getting to some resolution, and their face, it's just this triage, and they don't necessarily get to walk through the person to healing, or to know what happened, right? So you're just left with, or when it doesn't go the way that you would like it to, or you lose a patient, whatever it is for them. And so that cumulative, and I think overall that's largely what we deal with for most people anyway, than just, I rarely ever have a person come into my office who has one trauma. It's a lot of stuff that builds up over time.
And it's, most of us live close to the fire station that we work at, or the area that we patrol, or whatever. And that's kind of the difference between military and first responders is, things that happen to them, it's over there, and then they come back. For us, it's, I can drive down my street and, oh, I've worked a coat on a guy over there, or, I ran a kid who got bit by a dog over there, or a car wreck right over there. And it's constant. You never get to get away from it. So you always have those reminders. And if you don't deal with that stuff, then it's not, oh, well, I ran a coat over there. It's, I ran a coat over there. And then you're back in the middle of it again if you didn't deal with it.
Okay. Kind of reliving a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can pick that up. It was just cutting you off.
Okay,
so.
sure. No.
It's fine.
Yeah, so that's a big piece of it, right? And then being able to, the delayed stress response, which is, what you and I have talked about, what you're talking about experiencing, what I experienced, and you might have that acute immediately after something. So even with, with your husband's stroke, or with what I went through with Jeremy, but then it's kind of you just go back, right? You just do what you have to do. And so that's when that delayed stuff can come up. And then we explain more about post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress disorder, and when it, how it complicates or continues, or, when it turns into this thing that becomes a disorder, right? Explaining the nervous system. So we usually share about that, and just, again, it's a huge piece of normalizing how our system works, how this is all, functioning, and it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, but then sometimes it just does it too much, right? And so anything, Andy Burgess, amazing coach and equine coach that I get to work with too, along with Julie Baker, and but Andy always talks about this, any skill, and I'm paraphrasing, so this is not exactly her words, But anything can be overused. So even something positive, right? Its overuse can become where it's not so positive anymore. And so our nervous system has this great functioning that it does in response to help us survive. But then when it's staying that way or it's staying activated all the time, then it's not so helpful. And so that's a piece that we have to know about, and then we can work with it. So that's why the education is so important. So we know what we can do if we know what's going on.
Okay.
Yes, you sound like you were saying.
Well, no, I was just going to say, well, I mean, I'm sure you've seen, wildlife documentaries, right? With the lion chasing the gazelle or whatever in Africa, and they almost get them. And then you see the gazelle get away and they run off a little bit, and then they just stand there and like shake for a minute, and then they run off and they're fine. But that's basically what our bodies do. It's their nervous system is firing, and it's basically flushing all those toxins out. Well, we as people tend to do that, but a lot of times we will interrupt the process.
Okay.
Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
and then that's where, problems start happening.
Right. We get stuck.
Yeah, we get stuck and don't let our bodies do what they naturally want to do. You go into a stressful situation or whatever, and, you come out and you puke or, whatever. Those are natural stress responses for your body. And trying to, not let your body do that is, it leads to problems.
Yeah. And then the story we tell ourselves about it, right? And that's a big piece. And so that's what we try to normalize for people, especially who have a hard time. Like any of that stuff can feel weak, right? Like, or my body's doing all of these things, or I'm, my heart's beating, or I'm having a panic attack, or my stomach gets upset, or whatever, where we can normalize that these are a part of stress response and symptoms, or part of that system and how it works and functions. Or the shaking, like the discharging. This is why we love using horses in therapy, because they show us their nervous system functions very much like ours. And so they can teach us a lot about it, and how they discharge that energy, like Jeremy's talking about. But the animals aren't telling themselves a story about it. They're just responding and dealing with it and doing it. And they do how God created them to do, and they're not holding on to it. But one of the beautiful parts about being human, right, is the language that we can put to things, the story, the narrative that we have. But that's often where we get stuck too, because we tell ourselves whatever it is that we tell ourselves about the experience, can be part of how we get stuck in it. And so, we can work on that piece, but at least normalizing all the science of how the nervous system functions. So we try to do that part. And then we know what to do with it. So even, I know I've got some allostasis on there. And so I won't go down that road. I won't go down all the science road. But basically it's about knowing too, that like we've got this part, like it's beautiful that we have this nervous system and this stress response system and survival resources, and this like set point, right? And it's flexible and fluid as humans. But there is a point that it's just too much. Like our systems are not meant to take all of it all the time without respite and without some break from it. And so that's what a huge part of this is about, that, even though we feel like we can be superhuman and power through, like our systems aren't meant to do that. So,
yeah. So basically it's that if you don't take the time to stop and deal with it, your body's going to do it for you.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like I always say, like I will get sick. I will work and work and work, and then I'll end up getting sick. And then my body's like, okay, if you're not going to take a break, I'm going to make you take a break. So, yeah.
I know that well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Yep. I'll go on here to stabilize.
Yes.
So, and what I may do is I may put this up for a second, and then I'll take it down because I feel like it's cutting you guys off. So,
okay.
So, and if anybody has any questions as you guys are listening, go ahead and type something in, because I can see comments and I can see Lisa and Cindy. So far, those are the only ones. But yeah, please put something in there if you guys have any questions at all. So, or just want to say hi. I can do that too.
Yeah, we'll take hellos or questions.
All right. So, for stabilize? What is that? And I'm
Yeah.
not sure I understand that one.
Yeah. So this piece is about, so if with anything that is going on, like that stabilization piece is huge. And so this is what, borrowing from Dr. Roger Solomon, who's a forensic psychologist, that I've been lucky to take some of his trainings. And he calls it chicken soup psychology. And it's just that it's nurturing, it's comforting, it's caring. And so, whether it's after something immediately happens, like you're talking about, an acute situation or an incident, or it's delayed and you hit burnout like I did, right? Or after the day I took him to the hospital, like having friends show up at the hospital, having my family there. So it's that stabilization part is huge just across the board, wherever you are on the spectrum. Okay. And so those 4 skills that we identified, or those S's that are part of stabilization, is one, just being able to be, just very basic, like safety, right? So making sure someone is physically safe, making sure they're emotionally or psychologically safe, making sure that they don't have, if somebody's at really high risk, or you're concerned about them, like what do they have access to, right? So this conversation of access to means or firearms or whatever comes up. So that's like that first piece of just making sure that somebody is safe. The security comes in a lot of ways, and being able to check in about even that that they have a place to go, that they have people around them that are going to create safety and security, that financially, right? Because that's a huge piece and that's a huge stressor. So when somebody's going through something difficult or it affects their job, like for me, if I would have had to have stayed working at the pace that I was, I don't know. Like, so for me, part of my healing was being able to step back. And so having the financial security to be able to do that. So, looking at all of those pieces, the social support and connection, and this is, a piece of our nervous system that we know now because of like polyvagal theory and recognizing that social connection is a huge part of our ability to feel safe, and how we get into that safe space of even of our nervous system. And so that's priceless, and that's a huge resource. So having support when we're going through something difficult, just because a lot of times we don't know what to say, right? And when what we went through, like, unless somebody had been through it, and I have some amazing friends who had been through something really similar and were able to go like, okay, here's what I went through, here's what I felt. And then there were other people who are like, I have no idea what to say, but I'm there for you. And that is priceless, right? And I experienced the same when that happened to Neil. Just there's not a right thing to say, but just knowing that people are there, and that's a really important piece in getting stabilized and being stable. And then the skills. So having the coping skills and strategies to even be able to know how to stabilize, to know how to ground, to know how to regulate, and then as part of healing. So that's where those pieces showed up.
Yeah. So a good thing for people that even if they're not going through it themselves, if they know somebody else that has either gone through something or going through something, I mean, that's kind of permission to give them. You don't have to know what to say.
Exactly.
Like you said, when people just reach out and just said, "Hey, I'm here."
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Right.
huge. And having people do that to me, and I've done that to other people that I didn't know what to say in their situation, but just not even, they don't even need to respond, just to know I'm here, know I'm thinking about you, know I'm praying about you, whatever. That was huge for me anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And that's I think we just have to own it. Like, and I don't, like I will feel pressure sometimes as a counselor to like, oh, I should know, or I should have an answer. And in reality, like the best thing is not sometimes like, I don't know, or I don't know exactly, but I'm here for you. Like, I'm here, I've got your back, got your six, like I'm present with you. And that ministry of presence is really powerful sometimes. And so, and that's easier to accept than somebody just trying to fix it or whatever, because sometimes a lot of things aren't fixable right then.
Yeah, well, and I think part of that, at least from my perspective, is having somebody there to listen and, just be there, but then being able to work it out on your own, you know, because I mean, sometimes that's the way that you best work through things is to, be able to come to that conclusion yourself. Because if somebody just tells you all the answers, what do you really learn?
Okay. Yeah, I guess. And as a fixer, I have a hard time sometimes not because I want to be able to help somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ask her. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
It's like, well, just do this. That's not how it works.
Yeah. And it's painful for us, right? To see someone else in pain is painful. And then, like, that's what empathy is, right? You feel it. You're not just observing it, you feel it. And so we want that to go away. We want that to stop for that person. And so it's like, yeah, like if I could fix it, I absolutely would. And I wish I could, but I can't. So, but I'm here with you and we'll figure it out. Right? Like I'm on the walk with you. I'm on the journey with you. And so we'll figure it out. But yeah, that's a difficult space to be in.
Yeah, so I've had some comments that talk about, it's a heavy topic, but enjoy listening and glad you're sharing. So my body gave me one of those messages this weekend, forced to slow down and rest. So yeah, it's kind of what you don't do it, it's going to tell you. Ministry of presence. Wow. So yeah, I mean, so this is pretty cool. And thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, and I can't take credit for ministry of presence. I'm pretty sure. So I have training in spiritual direction, and somewhere along the line, someone else much wiser than me said that. But
yeah, but sharing that information is a good thing. All right, I looked at the time and realized. So all right, so we're gonna keep going here.
Okay.
T.
Yes, the tactical advantage part. I'm gonna let him. He likes tactical.
Well, right, because it's cool. Yeah, so, and we had talked about this, the tactical advantage of know yourself, know your terrain, and know your adversary. So, and kind of the way that we had talked about it whenever we were coming up with this was, specifically for, military and first responders and, the challenges that we face that are particular to our career fields. But these can be applied to everybody. The first one of, know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's, it's huge to be able to take that time and check in with yourself and know, okay, that goes back to the recognize of, oh, hey, there's a problem here. I'm not operating at, my full potential and, things are starting to affect me. So, I need to slow down or I need to check in or I need to do something so that, I get back on track. The next one. Let's slide back up. Yeah, know your terrain. Sorry. So know your terrain. That's what are you going to face? What are the challenges particular to you? And we all have them.
Mm-hmm.
You have your challenges that are unique to you. I have mine that are unique to me. She has hers that are unique to her.
Mm-hmm.
There are challenges that are, unique to career fields, and being able to recognize those early and seeing, okay, I know that I'm going to have to deal with this at some point, or I may run into this situation, or, these are the things, and knowing that just puts you ahead of the game and able to, when you have the coping skills, all that, you're not going to take such a big hit. You're going to be able to get through it and then move on, in a healthier way.
Okay.
So you can talk about your adversary.
Oh, okay. And this is all very so anybody, right, who's military or has, or post or veteran, whatever, would recognize this language very much. But the adversary in this, so we're not talking about necessarily some physical enemy, right, or adversary, but in these realms with trauma and stress, of recognizing that, so the pitfalls of my career or my, the terrain, recognizing that unhealthy coping skills can be our adversary, the negative effects of trauma or stress, or especially cumulative. So recognizing what those are and what those might be. And then the other pieces help us to build up resilience to those things. So, but recognizing that, there's an adversary in this stuff. A lot of times, especially for, not to keep throwing out military and first responders, but negative coping skills, avoidance, the compartmentalization that really is about avoidance and sweeping things under the rug, and then coping and dealing in really unhealthy ways is a pretty big adversary for their world, for their culture. So so that's what that having the tactical advantage. So knowing all that stuff then sets you up to then know what to do with it. How do I respond?
Yeah, no, that makes sense to know. Yeah, know that piece of the puzzle before you can move on.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So put that one, the optimize.
Optimize. So this is increasing all the good stuff. So everything that you learned prior, right? And so for me, even all those steps like prior and restore, all of my skills, all of my resources, including support system, which I don't think we lean on enough, especially for people who are service minded and helpers, and we're always the first ones to tend to even, help everybody else and, put ourselves on the back burner. And so that service over self comes up a lot. And so we can't forget support system, but having a support system too that creates safety to be able to say I'm not okay, right? Because if we have a support system that is like, nope, suck it up, buttercup, like it's not okay to not be okay. And so we need to create that psychological and emotional safety for each other to be able to be in that space. And so really, so the identifying and increasing all the positive and adaptive stuff. So all the good things, all the skills that I have, the resources that I already have. And that's what that optimized part is about, just building up more of that positive rather than focusing on the negative stuff too, to help build more resilience.
Okay. All right.
And resilience. Yes, of course it had to be in there. Big word. So this resilience piece, and we've talked about this a lot, like how that shows up. And so first, I think recognizing that all those other pieces of restore really do help to build resilience. And resilience is basically, the ability to bounce back. That's what it means, right? And so there's flexibility in it. There's fluidity. That's how we as humans were created. Our nervous systems are meant to be that way. Like we have ups and downs all throughout the day. And so we're created and meant to be that way. And that's what resilience is about. But we're not just born with it, right? Like it is created through and early on through safe, healthy attachments. And then that continues, right? And so that piece, I think recognizing that all those skills and resources that we've identified as helpful, but then recognizing too that resilience is not just a mindset, it's not just a theory, but it's about resilient behaviors. And so there are things that we can do to help build it. It's not something that we just have or don't. So as adults, there's lots of things that we can do. The PPE analogy is kind of just how we make sense of resilience and resilient behaviors. So I don't know if you want to kind of explain that through PPE, or you want me to
Well, I mean,
handle that?
so PPE is personal protective equipment. So, and we kind of use the analogy of, I'm not going to go into a house fire without my bunker gear and my SCBA. Cops and military are not going to go into a gunfight without a gun and a bulletproof vest. And that's how we talk about, having the tools to set yourself up for success instead of, leaving all your stuff back on the truck and setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, and even thinking about masks, right? Like we all know about masks now. We're all having to wear masks, and so it's this idea that it's better than nothing, right? Like without getting into a debate about masks, but just this idea that and that's how resilient behaviors are, right? They're not 100% effective 100% of the time, but the more you have, the more resilient behaviors and resources you have, the better. And so, with PPE, with personal protective equipment, it's better to have it than not have it. far safer and set you up for success. So that's kind of how we view resilience, and it takes effort to work on that and build it too.
Yeah. So no matter what occupation you're in, setting yourself up in the best scenario that you can going into any situation is kind of what you're saying, basically.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Put this back in here. Engage.
Yeah.
So like E.
Yes. Yeah. This is the big piece of getting and staying engaged in life, and in your why, and this was a big thing for us. And so even in, um, I think for him coming out of recovery and going back into the field, and for me coming out of burnout and going back into the field, a big piece of that was reconnecting with our why, with our purpose. We might have lots of different purposes. Like, I don't think people are just built with just one thing, right? Like, there's lots of stuff. And so this engagement part is about getting back out there. So the recovery, the restoring, and getting back engaged in life, like having hobbies, having friends, having faith, these things outside of work, because we aren't just our work. But a lot of us can get very much wrapped up into that being a huge piece of our identity. And so being able to restore that, and so either stay engaged or get engaged, and connecting again with your purpose or your why for why you do what you do anyway. And that can be a big part of healing. It doesn't take everything away, right? Like, we've got to have the health, and we've got to take care of ourselves. We can't just ride along on just that why for something, and not take care of ourselves in the meantime. But it's a big piece of staying connected in what we do.
Okay. So that's part of like the finding your fulfillment, things that you can do to make you happy, and or have just like, I don't know, like you said, the more than the why.
Yeah. Yeah, because I
So
think there's a lot of stuff that we don't, because people will come to me and even talk about like coping skills or strategies. And I think that people aren't aware of how many things they already have their resources, because we think it has to be like some particular skill we learned somewhere. But taking a walk is, hanging out with my dog, drinking my coffee out on the deck and watching the birds, like all of those things that we do that are helpful to us are part of our resources and our coping skills. And so there's a variety of things that help us.
yeah.
They can be unique to the individual. I mean, like she said, it could be anything, as from taking a walk or drinking coffee or whatever.
Yeah.
It's something that you do for you that is able to let you recenter yourself. Doesn't have to be some, you don't have to sit in your room and meditate for 20 minutes listening to a particular song or, whatever. And that's the only way that you can have any skills. It literally can be anything.
Yeah. Okay. And so that's one Lisa had asked. So how would a stay-at-home mom that has kids that she's homeschooling, working from home, feeling isolated, have some equipment or resources to point them to? And so you kind of answered a good portion of that there, of kind of just finding those things that are helpful to that particular person. But if reading a book, they might hide in a corner, have their quiet space, read for a few minutes, or watch a fun little episode of something, or finding some way to decompress a little bit.
Yeah. And I know it's hard right now. And a dear friend of mine posted on Instagram that this, well, it wasn't a meme, but anyway, like, I always want to call things that just because, like, that's the word I know. But anyway, whatever it was an image with words that said, sitting in the car before you go in the house is considered self-care. It was something like that. And I'm like, that is so true. And right now it's hard for people, especially who are working from home. And I've seen a lot of people struggle because there's not that same transition, right? So at least if you're going from the office to home, you can kind of decompress a little bit on that car ride home, or, run in the store if you need to, or take a little extra time. And so, I've worked with a lot of people on, like, then how do we create that? So even if it's acknowledging, and with the family, like, so normally I would have this 15, 20 minute, 45-minute commute. So being able to add that in somewhere, like, take a little bit of a break, get out of the house for a minute, take some time when you shut off the computer to do something that you do enjoy doing that helps you decompress, especially if you're working from home. because it's hard to have that transition.
Yeah.
And I would second that with Lisa's Hallmark Christmas movies.
Which they
Yes.
have started. So
Oh, yay, perfect. No, that's all that goes on in our house from, at least November 1st.
Yeah.
November 1st.
my alerts that pop up. So they have started.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So along with the no matter what position or no matter what occupation you're in right now and one of the things you and I talked about ahead of time, this time of year is when people are normally looking forward to spending time with family and visiting to see loved ones and doing different things. Yeah, Cindy said exercising. Yeah, ditto.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
It's may not be the same this year for anybody. I mean, I know personally, because I've got 4 kids and they're going to be in 4 different places this year. And we may not get to see each other. So, and I know you guys are used to, and we talked about that, maybe not spending the holidays with family anyway because of job situations. So, but as people are struggling and needing to see family and need to, be a part of that, any suggestions for how to deal with that as we go forward?
Well, I mean, I can speak from my personal experience. So growing up, my dad worked in the oil field. So he would be gone for anywhere from 14 days at a time to 30 days at a time. And holidays, Christmas, whatever, it didn't matter. If it was his shift to be out on the rig, he was gone for that whole month or 14 days or whatever it was. So we got used to, doing Thanksgiving in October or Christmas in the middle of January or middle of November. So for me, whenever I, got on the fire department, it wasn't that big of a transition as far as not being around for the holidays because it's something that I grew up with and we just made adjustments. So, and I know a lot of people, and we've even done it, for our nephew's birthday, we had a big Zoom, call or whatever.
Yeah, during COVID.
Yeah, and it's just, so for right now, with everything going on, it is an adjustment, but there are still ways to stay connected. Everybody has a cell phone, and I know it's not the same, but you can still reach out and talk to your family members, talk to your friends. You can get on Zoom or Facebook Live or whatever. Even though you're not there physically, you can still be there in spirit. So, and I think, and that's one thing that I have seen a lot of is people doing that. So.
Yeah, we actually talked about doing since probably even Thanksgiving is not going to be. My husband has 5 sisters, and so we've got a lot of family that we normally try to get together. So we did talk about having a pie over Zoom, just so we could at least, share a part of the day together.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it brings on some different stress feelings and some different, more emotional things that people are dealing with. So, but yeah, reaching out, calling people, still making the connection.
Yeah. Well, and we're really, this is a time in history that we haven't really been in before, with as far as, needing to be separated physically and all that stuff. Not since, Spanish flu back.
Right.
That's where life for that. Yeah. Not in our lifetime. It's something totally new for most people of, not as much as we want to be there, we can't. Mm-hmm. So, but, making adjustments and, people seem to be doing that. But then, just remember that you're not alone. There's always, almost everybody has somebody they can call or somebody they can, get on a Zoom meeting with or, whatever it may be that they can reach out and connect with. So, and it's just taking those steps.
Yeah. And I think being people that are going to help other people know that, right? Because we might have people in our life that we don't reach out to outside of our, really core family or friends, or even, a lot of us you may not be sharing those things or how you actually are, right? Like we ask people, how are you doing? And so, I always ask, like my clients know that, like I might do that pat answer, or question of how are you? And then as always, the second round comes around, it's like, but how are you really? Like, let's talk about what's really going on. So we also need to create that safety for each other, right? And start the conversation of like, hey, I am here. You can reach out, or I'm going to reach out to you first. And this is a difficult time, but it's been amazing to also see how many people have gotten connected in ways that they didn't think they could. That's been pretty incredible. And I've seen a lot of people feel closer. And I mean, during the shutdown, I talked to my mom and sister on video chat more than I ever have. And it's like, I miss it, because then it's like we got busy again and we went back to work. And so there's some pieces of it that have actually, I think, brought us closer. So just being able to do what we can do, recognize like it's bittersweet and we're going to have some feelings about it, and some grief in different ways, but doing what we can do is a big piece. Like what is in your control? Yeah, because a lot's not sometimes.
That is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Lisa had asked me and if you had covered E, and so I don't think I left it up there very long. So I will put those back up, or I can put those in the comments so people can see those. But you guys have been, this is awesome. You've covered, I mean, we covered a lot of information. But so if you have not followed them so I know you're on Instagram. So the Team Restore KC, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And I'll put that in here too. So if people haven't, that way they can make sure, because you always, you put up a lot of great information.
Thank you.
I think I got it in there. Yeah, I did. And so they can keep there. Good. It did follow. So, that way, if they've got any questions or want to reach out, but I really appreciate you guys coming on, sharing your story and giving information so that, I mean, other people are going to benefit by far. So thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, it was fun.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I will put a little thing in here. I'm changing it up. Instead of 2 weeks, it's in 3 weeks. November 17th, we're going to have John Kennedy, who happens to be my uncle also, but he is one of the smartest people I know, and he does the genealogy, our family genealogy, and he is going to just kind of get us started on if you have any interest in learning about genealogy or where to start. It will be very interesting. That's where I got my passion for it from. So I'm looking forward to that.
Anyway. I know I'm going to be on that one.
It's going to be fascinating. I know part of it, and I'm still very excited.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I know I've kept you guys on here an hour. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And yeah, Lisa said, you're an inspiration to all. And thank you for being so transparent. So
thank you, Lisa.
Yay. All right.
Hopefully our story can help somebody else. So that's what we're here for.
Yep. That's the goal.
Very good. All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you.